Hello everyone and welcome to the Learn Arabic with Me Verbs series, and this is level 1 and I'll explain to you what that means in a minute. And this is episode 1. I'm going to introduce you to the form 1 perfect tense, and I will introduce you to verb patterns and the most common pronouns and object suffixes. First of all, I want to tell you something about me. I'm an undergraduate at Jesus College, Oxford, studying beginners Arabic and Russian. As you might expect, the teaching there is very grammar intensive to have a capacity to subsequently know immediately how to use new words when we learn them. And I have tried to mirror my own experience of learning Arabic grammar in an intense setting in my series and subsequent syllabus. To start, I just want to introduce to you my expectations. I'm assuming by the time you've got to me, you've learned how to read Arabic and use short vowels. I'll be adding all voweling like classical Arabic to understand cases and sounds of verb endings. That is to say, I will be as precise as possible until a later date, and I'll specify when I'll stop. I'll sort of try to wean you off short vowels and teach you how to learn read like a real Arabic reader. And you'll have a knowledge. Hopefully, before you start this, you'll have a knowledge of commonly used grammatical terminology, e.g. infinitives, plurals, tenses, etc. Now, these are the aims of level 1. By the end of the Learn Arabic with Me verb series level 1, you'll be able to recognize and use all the pronouns and object suffixes in Arabic, conjugate common verb forms 1, 2, and 8 in all tenses, in the indicative mood, and we'll come on to that later, you don't need to know what that means yet, and persons, and conjugate all irregular verbs in form 1 in all tenses and persons. I also hope that you'll be able to recognise and identify root letters in these forms. And if any of this you don't understand now, that's why they're aims for the end of this level. Just bear with me and I'll take you through it all. So we're going to start with the most common pronouns. So I, Anna. You masculine singular is anta. You feminine singular is anti. He is huwa. She is hiya. And they is hom. And the reason I specify the masculine singular and feminine singular is that Arabic has quite a few pronouns and more than any other language that I have studied. So they have feminine singular plural in third person, feminine singular dual, and we'll come on to that, but this is why I state this now. So learn this as the you masculine and feminine singular. You can see they're very similar, and if there were no short vowels they would look the same. You'd have to figure it out in context. This is why I'm using them now. So Anna, anta, anti, huwa, hiya, and hom. So now we're going to talk about patterns, and we start with form 1. There are alternative forms of verbs in Arabic, and each form has a slightly alternative, nuanced meaning. And you can derive verbs from their usually 3-letter stems. And again, don't worry about this usually yet. That will come very much later in the Learn Arabic with Me verbs series. Like I said here. We will start with verb form 1, which is the most fundamental form of verb in Arabic, and it's where everyone begins, including me. The form of Arabic verbs is defined by its voweling and use of other consonants. Again, you don't necessarily need to understand what this means yet, but we use 3 letters as a base to place the voweling on, and all verbs are different permutations of these 3 base letters. And the base letters we use are f, a, and l. Now, when you use different consonants instead of these 3, these are known as radicals. So f, a, and l. And the reason we use these is because fa'ala means to do. So it's an easy way to sort of learn the rhythm, the jadr, which is the pattern of verbs, but you don't need to worry about that just yet. Just remember that you can learn a form by learning what consonants and what short vowels are around these 3 base letters. Now, we're going to start with form 1, like I said. Now the voweling of the pattern of form 1 in the perfect tense is either fa'ila or fa'ala. For example, you've got shariba, to drink, fahima, to understand, sami'a, to hear, kataba, to write, darasa, to study. And I suggest you learn these verbs now because they will come up very often. They're sort of the first verbs that every Arabic beginner starts with. I should tell you now that in Arabic there is no such thing as an infinitive as we understand it in Western European languages, i.e. to do. We learn a verb from its third person perfect masculine form. In other words, kataba means he wrote, darasa means he studied, shariba means he drank, and so on. But it functions just the same as an infinitive in that this is the base which you use to learn a verb from. So we've established that there are two types of form 1 verb, fa'ila verbs and fa'ala verbs. Okay. So now we're going to conjugate form 1 verbs in the perfect tense with the most common pronouns that I've just discussed with you. Okay, so the perfect tense, if you haven't come across it in any other languages, refers to completed actions in the past. Let's take a fa'ala verb and a fa'ila verb as an example. So we have ana katabtu fahimtu, and I've left the pattern here with the 3 base letters, or fa, a, and la, so you can see that they share, kataba and fa'ala share the same voweling and consonant usage on their verb endings. So I'll show you the rest, but as you can see, this form 1 and actually all perfect tense first person singular verbs are defined by a sukun on their third radical, and then a t and a noon as a suffix. So you'll slowly get the hang of this, and you can see that the kasra here is kept as is consistent with the fa'ila pattern. So ana katabtu, I wrote, ana fahimtu, I understood. Anta Anta katabta, anta fahimta, anti katabti, anti fahimti, huwa kataba, huwa fahima. So you can see that this is where we derive our verbs. So he wrote, he understood. Then we have hiya katabat, hiya fahimat, and hum katabu, hum fahimu. Now, I should tell you before we go on, because we're going to learn how to use objects with these verbs, that the alif at the end of the third person plural is silent and drops if the verb form gains an object suffix, and I'll show you what this means. So this is essentially, this alif here is silent, so this is why this is pronounced fahimu. You don't pronounce this alif at all. So now to object suffixes. So when a verb in Arabic takes an object, the verb gains a suffix, which means something on the end of it, which denotes who or what the verb was done to. So you can think of this as the accusative case maybe, or simply the object of a verb. What's interesting is that it attaches to the verb in Arabic, so it becomes one word, which is unlike most other languages which I've studied. So ana turns to ni as an object suffix at the end of the verb, and if you don't understand what I mean, I'll give you some examples in a minute. Anta goes to ka, anti goes to ki, huwa goes to hu, hiya goes to ha, and hum goes to hum. Interestingly, this stays the same. Let's have a few examples and practice. So an example of a verb with an object suffix would be this: I understood him. So fahimtuhu is made up of fahimtu, I understood, and the object suffix hu, fahimtuhu. And can you see that it forms one word and the suffix comes at the end. Suffix means end, prefix means beginning of a word. So try to work out I heard them. So I heard سمعت, سمعت, and them as an object suffix is hon. So put that together, سمعتهم. They understood her. And remember what I said about the third person masculine plural ending. There's a soft aleph. I say soft aleph, an unpronounced aleph which disappears with an object suffix. So have that in your head. So understood, fahima, so it's a fa'ila verb. It's going to have a kasra on its second root letter. So it's going to sound like this. Fahim uha. Sorry. Fahim uha. Without the aleph. That's the end of the first episode. Join me on the next one. We will be studying the imperfect tense in Form 1, and you're well on your way to mastering Arabic verbs. Thank you very much, and here are my details.